Honestly, when I was postpartum, probably. So when I was researching how do I prevent diabetes, because my dad's a type 2 diabetic and I wanted to help him. And I was struggling to lose weight postpartum. For the first time in my life, I'd never struggled with maintaining my weight or my body composition. But any woman who has had a child knows that is a huge experience for your body. So
Dr. Morgan Nolte, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to chat with you. But before we do that, I'd love to just learn a little bit about you. What makes you you and why are you doing all the awesome things you're doing?
well, thanks, Jay, for having me. I'm really happy to be on your show. And hopefully, if I can help just one person listening today, that is my goal, to inspire somebody or to change their perspective about health or weight loss. And by trade, I'm a geriatric physical therapist, which means I'm really good at treating many conditions at one time. In traditional geriatric physical therapy, we work a lot with people in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Many of them have multiple health conditions like diabetes, heart disease, dementia, muscle wasting, Alzheimer's disease, those kinds of things. And it didn't take me long before I realized, wow, like their quality of life is very poor. And I would love to do something to help them earlier in life to prevent these conditions in the first place. So I did a lot of just independent study on diabetes specifically and Alzheimer's disease and what do we do to prevent them? And it really comes down to insulin resistance because that's at the root cause of all of the conditions that I was treating in geriatric physical therapy. And it's also the root cause of obesity for many, many people. So that's another thing that I saw. But usually by the time they're in their 80s or 90s, sometimes obesity really isn't the problem. It's actually the opposite, like they're losing muscle mass. And so it is important for body composition too. And I realized that, if I'm going to be a parent, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm going to work, I am going to do something that I am so passionate about. So I started my business almost 6 years ago now when my son was born, which was kind of a wild idea, but I couldn't not do it. I was that passionate about it. And, it's been a whirlwind since then, and it's evolved since then. But our core mission has always been to help adults prevent and reverse insulin resistance for long-term weight loss and disease prevention so that no one needs a geriatric physical therapist. And that's kind of why I started the business. A little bit about me just personally. I live in Nebraska. Husband's a farmer. Like I said, 2 kids. So I really love life. And I love just leading by example for my family and my clients on this low insulin and inflammation lifestyle.
Very cool. I love that. I mean, I have so many questions. First, when did you kind of come up with your own correlation between insulin, the type 2 diabetes, type 3 diabetes, we'll call that, the Alzheimer's dementia state? Like, when did you start to make those correlations and those connections?
Honestly, when I was postpartum, probably. So when I was researching how do I prevent diabetes, because my dad's a type 2 diabetic and I wanted to help him. And I was struggling to lose weight postpartum. For the first time in my life, I'd never struggled with maintaining my weight or my body composition. But any woman who has had a child knows that is a huge experience for your body. So I was reading books like The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung and The Diabetes Code by the same author, and realizing, wow, like my goal of achieving my pre-baby body, essentially, the strategies to get there are not any different than the strategies that my dad needs to use to reverse his diabetes, or that my mom should use to lose the weight that she wants to lose. And so it really kind of came through this genuine self-study to help myself, to help my parents, just become the healthiest version of ourselves. And then I realized, wow, there's a lot more people like my parents out there than I realized. So I call them people in the gray zone of healthcare. They might have early symptoms of insulin resistance, like rising blood sugar, a waist circumference that's larger than what they would like, high triglycerides, high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol, and their doctor's not really doing anything about it. A lot of times they'll just hear like, we'll just watch it for now. How long did my dad hear? We'll just watch it for now until boom,
Yeah.
all of a sudden his A1C is in the nines and he's prescribed a medication. So there's so much that we can do in this gray zone of healthcare to prevent the need for medications in the first place, to reverse the need for medications. And that's really, really important when it comes to type 2 diabetes. And then what you alluded to, type 3 diabetes, which is also called Alzheimer's disease. So there's a lot of really good evidence that Alzheimer's disease is not necessarily caused by these plaques and tangles in the brain that we thought, but that those are more symptoms of underlying metabolic conditions in the brain, such as oxidative stress, such as inflammation, and brain insulin resistance caused by blood sugars being too high for too long. So what's good for your blood sugar is good for your brain sugar. And if someone's interested in learning more about that link between dementia and diet, or dementia and blood sugar, I highly recommend the book Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Georgia Ede. I just had her on my podcast. She was phenomenal, a really, really intelligent guest. So that's my passion, and it's partly selfish too, because I want my parents around. I want my parents healthy. I worked with 60-year-olds that acted like 80-year-olds in geriatric physical therapy, and I want my parents to be 80 and acting like they're 60. So part of this is selfish too. I really want to pay it forward to aging adults. I think grandparents can change the world. They've definitely enhanced my life so much. So I think it's very important to have good health as we age, and I'm very passionate about that.
Totally agree. In the show notes, you stated that there's the fact that 88% of adults experience some degree of insulin resistance. Like, talk about that, because that's a startling number. Like when you hear 88% of adults, like what's the capacity of that number?
It's bonkers, isn't it? So that study was done, and what it looked at was how many adults have optimal metabolic health based on a few key markers of metabolic syndrome, which is just another way to say insulin resistance. It's really at the core of all of it. So they looked at, like, you could be in that 12% of people that were metabolically healthy if you had a healthy blood sugar level, so fasting blood sugar under 100, healthy blood pressure level. I'm guessing the cutoff they use is probably 120 over 80. Healthy HDL, a healthy triglyceride, and a healthy waist circumference. And so only 12% of adults in America meet that criteria now, which is very startling and sad, especially when with insulin resistance, if nothing changes, things get worse. We hear this saying a lot that, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I couldn't disagree more. I think if nothing changes, things get worse. You add up years of metabolic harm on your body. And then you talk so much about mindset and habit change on the show. The longer things wire together in your brain, they fire together, they wire together, and it's harder to break those habits. So the sooner we can get started, the better, I believe.
Why do you think it is? You said something earlier about let's just watch it. Like that seems to
Yeah.
be like the standard number. And like even when, with all of my clients, like they'll usually send me their blood work after they get it done, because I'll say, hey, what did your doctor say about this? And they'll be like, about what? And I'm like, your insulin number. They'll be nothing. I'm like, what about your hemoglobin A1C? They're like, nothing. I'm like, it's so, and it irritates me to no end. And now I'm kind of used to it. I don't expect them to say, give me the answer that I'm looking for. But it is startling. Why do you think that is the state of? Because my perspective is that obesity, diabetes, and all of the ancillary diseases that come with, insulin resistance have the potential to bankrupt our entire medical system and our country, for lack of a better term. That could be an extreme Jayism, and most of my listeners are used to that. But I really believe that. I think we could be on the verge of medical bankruptcy if we don't get a handle on this. So why are we still using let's just watch it as the answer?
I do believe it comes back to money. My brother is a physician. He's a plastic surgeon, but I talked to him once and I said, Brad, why do you think doctors are just prescribing medications instead of providing evidence-based behavior change counseling to their patients? Like, why are we prescribing metformin before we prescribe a low-carb diet? Why are we prescribing Januvia before we prescribe exercise? Why are we not prescribing lifestyle changes? And he said 2 reasons. Number 1, doctors are jaded and they don't believe that patients will follow through.
I believe that.
Number 2, money. So most physician practices who bill insurance go on a volume basis, which means the more people they can see in a day, the more they can bill insurance and the more money they can make. Therefore, the shorter the visits, the less time you have with your physician, the more money they can make, the more they can recruit physician assistants and nurse practitioners to see you instead of the doctor, the more money they can make. So we have this medical system that is highly financially incentivized to not help you be well. We have a sick care system, not a health care system. And it's really on the onus of the person, the individual person, to learn and educate themselves and advocate for themselves. And I think a beautiful example of this is ask for a fasting insulin test. Research has shown that fasting insulin, which is the hormone responsible for controlling your blood sugars in the first place, blood sugars are actually a downstream effect of your insulin sensitivity on all of your cells. So checking fasting insulin has been shown to predict type 2 diabetes 10 to 20 years before you will see that downstream effect of rising blood sugar levels. And you don't capture that information in a standard blood panel that only includes fasting glucose, which is your blood sugar at any given moment in time, or hemoglobin A1C, which is your average blood glucose readings over about 3 months. Insulin is being completely ignored by many, many physicians, in large part because that's simply not how they were trained. It is not hard for them to just include fasting insulin on the lab order, but many of them are simply unaware of the importance of doing so. I get so much feedback from our Reversible members about, oh, I asked for a fasting insulin test and my doctor's like, we don't need that. That's not necessary. We just use A1C. We only do that for a type 2 diabetic who's insulin dependent. And they just don't understand the importance. So what this means is over your lifespan, your insulin levels could be rising for 10, 15, 20 years. Let's say they start rising in your 30s, very, very common. And then by the time you're 50, you're diabetic, you're pre-diabetic. And you're like, where the heck did this come from? I haven't necessarily changed what I'm eating. I haven't changed my physical activity levels. And all of a sudden I'm having all of these health problems, and they attribute it to aging, or their doctor's like, oh, you're just getting a little bit older. Like this stuff is normal. It's common to gain weight as you age. I kid you not. I saw the other day that in 2023, the American Diabetes Association actually lowered the standard of a normal acceptable hemoglobin A1C for adults 65 and older to like 7.0, which is well in the diabetic range. So now we're considering diabetes normal. This is why 3 out of every 4 adults age 65 and older has either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And this prediabetes is, which is insulin resistance. If you have prediabetes, you have insulin resistance. It is going completely ignored by the doctor. Why? Because of what we just talked about. They are not incentivized to keep you well. They are incentivized to prescribe you a medication, which according to practice standards, they can't do until you're already diabetic. So that's why this just watch it for now is going on. A lack of understanding by physicians, a lack of belief in their patients, being jaded, being those physicians that are just going through the motions, one patient after another, after another, after another. Healthcare practitioners are burnt out. And I don't like, look at the nurses. I think especially bless nurses. I think they keep our country going. However, many nurses that I worked with are unhealthy themselves.
Yeah.
And it's because they have a lifestyle which does not facilitate keeping insulin and inflammation low. They're stressed out, they're doing shift work, so sometimes their circadian rhythms are off. I mean, hospitals and doctors' offices are the worst place from a healthy food standpoint. People are always bringing in junk food into the hospitals. It's a toxic food environment for them. And stress, stress does contribute to insulin resistance too. So there's so many things, but we have to understand that insulin resistance, just like obesity, is a biopsychosocial condition. There is biology going on in your body contributing to how we eat, how we feel, how we metabolize food. There's the psychological aspect, which is how we think. How do we follow through and be consistent? And then there's the social aspect. And part of that is this false messaging that we're getting from physicians, completely overlooking metabolic health issues for decades. And those are precious, precious years. where you could be alerted that you have a problem. You could be encouraged to change your habits. But so many people are in denial, or they are blissfully ignorant,
Yeah.
about their true metabolic condition.
The majority of the blood work that I look at, I would say pre-diabetes is like standard, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I would say 9 out of 10 blood works that I get, because I live in the world of weight loss, right? Human
Mhm.
transformation and whatnot. It's like you said earlier, you got me thinking, it's like, it's so looked at as, well, it's, for me, when I see pre-diabetes, right? Like you're 0.1%, marker away from being full-blown diabetic, and there's zero conversation, there's zero anything. And the client, the patient, views that as still being okay, being
Mhm.
normal. Whereas, in my world, it's like this giant red flag. Like, I'm already looking at that person as being diabetic. Like,
Yep.
and I think if we approached it from that perspective, we could really help some people. So why is that? Why are we allowing that number, that pre-diabetic number that hasn't just ticked over that one little thing, to not start the change? We don't start the change, like you said, until the catastrophe happens. Then we start making like progressive changes. How do we get the patient, the client, the consumer to view that as with the serious nature that it is?
I
Because
mean,
they're
I
not hearing that from their doctor. And so I think they wait for that. How do
think.
we get them, if they're listening to this podcast, to understand the severity of that?
I mean, I hope just this conversation, we can't control what their doctors say,
Right.
but understand that don't just rely on that glucose or the hemoglobin A1C. Check your fasting insulin level. It should be less than 6. And I think that if we have a more sensitive marker to metabolic change that gives us decades of a heads up that, hey, you do have a problem, that's going to be motivating for people. So many people think that they're healthy because they have a quote unquote normal or not so bad glucose or hemoglobin A1C. But if we can check insulin and prove to them, hey, you are well on, this is like pre-diabetes. This is your heads up. You cannot bury your head in the sand. You cannot pretend like nothing is happening. Because what happens if you do? What are the consequences of diabetes? I'll tell you a couple of things. The average person with type 2 diabetes spends $12,000 a year on their diabetes care. And I have not done the compounding interest math, but I'd be very curious to know, let's say someone's 60 years old, they have, well, I'll say 65. Let's say that they have type 2 diabetes. They're spending $12,000 a year. Maybe they live for 15 more years. Let's start with a $12,000 investment and add $12,000 to that every year and see how much money you have saved just because you don't have type 2 diabetes. So the first thing to recognize is type 2 diabetes is expensive, and it is caused by insulin resistance. And that's not going to be your only problem. I never saw somebody with type 2 diabetes who didn't also have some degree of heart disease, like high blood pressure. And it was very, very rare when I saw somebody with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure who did not have some level of cognitive impairment. So not only is it expensive, but it's expensive for your quality of life. We want to make our health span, which is the years that we have full mobility and independence and a high quality of life. We want to make that health span match our lifespan, which is like birth to grave when you actually die. We want to be as healthy and vibrant and independent as possible, as long as possible. And when you have insulin resistance, that line of decline starts a lot sooner. You might start to see the decline. Maybe you're overweight, you have joint pain, inflammation, you're fatigued, you can't do the things that you want to do. Well, that's because of decades of health choices, which you have made consciously or unconsciously, and you now have the opportunity to change. So just because that health span is going down, that doesn't mean that you can still make choices in your 50s, 60s, 70s. It's never too late to bring that line back up to match that lifespan a bit more. So we know that we talked about the financial cost of diabetes. On average, somebody with type 2 diabetes loses 6 years of life. And so maybe you would have died at 90 and you died at 84. Well, what did you miss? You probably missed the birth of a couple great grandchildren. And like I said, the quality of those years also decreases because when you have diabetes, your risk for heart disease, kidney disease, diabetic retinopathy, which is where the nerves in your eyes, like the nerve endings in your eyes, start to get diseased and you see black spots. So instead of seeing a clear picture, it's like there's black splotches all over your vision. You have peripheral neuropathy. You have side effects of all the medications. So I think that we have got to be better about future pacing our consequences. So how is my current trajectory looking? Is my current trajectory getting me to the retirement that I want, where I can spend my money on the things that I want to spend it on, not my time in the doctor's office, not taking a bunch of medications, not being immobile and low energy? Like, you want to keep up with your kids at the zoo? Like, now is the time to start training and maintaining optimal metabolic health. So I believe that the biggest barrier to change are people's current circumstances, what they see, what they hear, their like their rhythm of life is what I call it, their established daily habits, whether for better or worse, those habits for better or worse. External cues, so like your work environment, your friends, your family, all of these things are people's biggest obstacles to change. And so I think what can help is to make somebody inspirationally dissatisfied with either where they're currently at or future pace them, like I just did, to their trajectory of what things are going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years if they don't make any changes now. Because somebody has to be inspirationally dissatisfied enough to get off. I love the story of the whining dog. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So there, just pretend with me, go with it. It's just a story. Let's say that there was a dog on a porch and it was whimpering and whining and it was super annoying. And the owner was just sitting there putting up with the whining. And another neighbor comes across the street and they're like, man, make your dog be quiet. Why is your dog whining all the time? And the owner of the dog was like, well, they're sitting on a nail. And the neighbor was like, well, why don't they just get up so that they stop whining? And the owner was like, oh, it doesn't hurt bad enough. And so I think a lot of people are sitting on these nails of, inflammation, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, weight gain, but they're not doing anything about it because it doesn't hurt bad enough.
Right.
So I think future pacing those consequences can help it hurt bad enough to become inspirationally dissatisfied. And then the next step, which I'm sure you cover with your clients super well, is future pace the vision that you want for yourself. Because I like to say, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So many people know what they don't want. Well, I don't have diabetes. I don't have high blood pressure. I don't want all this belly fat. I don't want my arms to jiggle when I wave. I don't want to like just have to wear pants all the time because I'm self-conscious about my legs. I don't want to have to wear, 3/4 length sleeves because I'm self-conscious about my arms all the time. And I'm like, great, you're telling me what you don't want. Now tell me what you do want, because that's like going to a restaurant and telling them everything you don't want on the menu. Like, how are they supposed to help give you what you want if you don't even know what you want? So I think that once we become inspirationally dissatisfied by considering the consequences of our current actions, then we can formulate that future vision of ourselves that's healthy, that's vibrant, that's independent, that's fit, that's at a healthy weight with good metabolic health, and have that North Star, and then essentially make all of our decisions from that vision. And I think if people learn nothing else today, I want to plant the seeds in their mind for them to start accepting and rejecting ideas from that future vision, from the future version of themselves who has reached all of their goals. So the person that reached your goals, that is the type of person that we want to start thinking like and behaving like now. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yes,
100%.
good at accepting and rejecting ideas from the goal. So would the future version of yourself who, oh, let's just say they weigh 140 pounds, they work out 5 days a week, they sleep 8 hours a night, they have good stress management, are they going to have that second glass of wine? Are they going to have that serving of dessert? Are they going to skip their workout? Are they going to stay up till 11 p.m. binging on Netflix? No. So we have to get very good at understanding, reverse engineering essentially our way towards the goal, and then start thinking like that now so that we can actually get there. We have to get out of our current thought habits, out of our current circumstances, and live from the goal.
Love that.
Yeah.
Kind of transitioning back to what kind of when talking to your brother and like the whole, over prescribing of everything. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the whole, phenomenon of the whole GLP-1s now that have kind of like, overtaken the world of weight loss, obesity, diabetes, like, anybody and everybody. I mean, you could probably fall down and land on somebody on a GLP-1 now. Let's just talk about that in all the aspects, like the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, GLP-1 agonists like the semaglutide or a Wegovy or Ozempic, what they do is they mimic a natural compound found in the body called GLP-1, which makes you feel full. That's all they do. That's all they're supposed to do, is make you feel fuller so that you eat less. And there's a few things that I would like to say there. The first is that I think that there's a place for these medications. I think if people are extremely overweight or obese, or they have a lot of either physical or psychological limitations to making the lifestyle changes required to get the weight off, and it's an urgent health thing, I think that those people can really benefit from the use of these medications properly prescribed and dosed under a physician. I think what we're seeing is people thinking these are a magic pill or a magic injection and not wanting to do the real work of weight loss, period. Like losing weight takes work and it takes sustained work. And there is no shortcut, there is no pill, supplement, or injection that can outdo the effects of an unhealthy lifestyle. You may see short-term results. I don't even, there's a new study on like the 4 years. Whoop-de-doo. I don't care if you keep your weight off for 4 years. I want you to keep your weight off for the rest of your life. I want you to have good body composition. I don't want you to need a prescription to have a healthy body. And so I think that they're being overprescribed for financial incentive reasons. That's number one. I think number two is that patients want them because they think it's going to be a quick fix or a magic solution, and that they're going to circumvent their way around the work that's actually required to keep the weight off. So I think when we're talking about these GLP-1 agonists, we have to recognize the goal is not to lose weight. That is not the goal. The goal is to lose weight and keep it off and maintain your muscle mass. So when we are focused solely on the scale, what does the scale say? How much weight am I losing this week? You lose sight of the longer term goal, which is long-term weight loss and improved body composition. And these medications can actually be counterproductive, in my opinion, to those end goals for a few reasons. The first is that for some people, they make them too full and then they don't want to eat enough. And if you don't eat enough protein while you are losing weight, you will lose a substantial amount of muscle mass. And then you're going to become what's called skinny fat. So yes, you will lose weight, but you will not have improved your muscle mass. You will have lost muscle mass. And whatever weight you lost will be more likely to come on because now you have a much slower basal metabolic rate because you have lower muscle mass, and muscle burns more calories than fat. So we have to focus on preserving lean muscle mass when we're losing weight. And if you're under eating protein while you're taking these GLP-1 agonists, or even if you're not while you're losing weight, that's going to be a problem for long-term weight loss. The second problem with these medications from an energy intake standpoint is if you're not eating enough to have the energy to work out, specifically to do resistance strength training activities, you will lose muscle mass as you lose weight. And again, you're going to slow the metabolism down. When you stop the medication, your appetite is going to come back. Sometimes there's even a rebound effect with your appetite, and you're going to regain the weight. The third thing is that it doesn't give you the opportunity this is not everybody, like, mind you, I understand this. This is not everybody. I think that there are many people on these medications genuinely trying to change their lifestyle and their habits at the same time. But I'm talking to people who are using these because they don't want to do the other work. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to grow personally, to develop the skills and the mindset that it takes to keep the weight off. It's a required part of weight loss to develop good thought habits, to develop good nutrition habits. So I kid you not, I hear of people on these medications and they're completely under eating protein. They're eating a ton of sugar still. And I'm like, waiting for the shoe to drop. When you stop this medication, your weight will come back on with a vengeance. And I will be sitting over here feeling bad for you because I know that there's a better way. So I
Yeah, I
think that,
just, oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was just saying, I just talked to an acquaintance, a couple of days ago. She's been on, one of the semaglutides for a couple of years now, had to come off of it for a surgery. And she said that her hunger is ravenous. She said she cannot stop eating anything. She tried to eat a shoebox the other day. She was
Oh
so
my
hungry.
gosh.
And she said it's so uncontrollable. And she's a medical provider. So she's a doctor and understands the science of the body. And she said she can absolutely not stop overeating now because I guess the rebound effect or whatever they're calling it is just unbelievable. And I also don't know any of the long-term, and I don't think anybody does. What are the long-term ramifications of, being on a medication like this for 3, 4, 5, 6, through perpetuity? Like, what are we dealing with there?
Right. I want to go back to the point. You cannot circumvent the
Yeah.
required lifestyle changes to keep the weight off. So this can be a jump start. This might be a bridge for some people.
Yeah.
This might be, it's okay, I think, in some circumstances, but we have to recognize that if you don't change your environment, if you don't change your eating habits, if you don't change your exercise habits, your sleep habits, and your stress habits, this is an expensive short-term solution that will negatively affect you long-term because it's probably compromising your muscle mass. And the other thing is, it's a GLP-1 agonist. There are things that we can do naturally to increase satiety. And the three things that I usually recommend: protein. So have 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight a day. So for me, that's 135 to 140 grams of protein. I eat that every day. The second thing is fiber. Many people are under eating fiber. This is especially important if you're on a lower carbohydrate diet because they can tend to be a little bit more like carnivorous in nature. And the fiber is important for our microbiome, our gut health. The bacteria that live in our gut eat the fiber that we eat. Even if it passes through us, they eat that. It's good for your gut health. So I try to aim for about 20 to 30 grams of fiber per day. And then the third thing that I do to improve my satiety is drink lots of water. I think that's very important. But then just sleep. I think sleep is such an overlooked aspect of health. When you're sleep deprived, which means getting less than 7 hours a night regularly, a couple things happen. Your hunger hormones, so ghrelin essentially, will go up. So you're going to need like even more GLP to like help you feel full. And then your satiety hormones go down. So focusing on these basic health habits, in my opinion, is a better use of your resources than getting a shot. And these are expensive. And I think that another point I wanted to make is it's a moneymaker for many physicians. I don't think it's going to be like this forever. I think that there will be better coverage for these where physicians won't be so financially incentivized. I got an email, I don't know who it was from a company that was like, are you interested in expanding your practice to provide semaglutide? Dr. So-and-so did it and they made an additional $24,000 in revenue in 1 month. And I'm like, how embarrassing for Dr. So-and-so. And I cannot believe that you are pitching me this email. I just
Yeah.
deleted it. I didn't even respond. I was just flabbergasted
Well, you know
that
what's funny? I'm not a
that
doctor, and
happened.
I got the same exact email.
Did
I got
you?
an email 2 days ago. This is like the third one I've gotten. They
Yes.
basically said, "Hey Jay, would you like to?" And for every patient that you get on, whatever one they were prescribing, we're going to give you a blank amount, like $1,000 kickback. Like it was
Yeah.
unbelievable. They're like, you can make an extra like 30 grand, or no, it was there's something crazy. It was like you can make an extra $250,000 a year if you'll start doing this with us. And I'm like, A, I'm not a doctor. B, this is so negligent. And so that's where stuff like this gets me. Is it's like once it gets to that level, that lets you know that there's a problem, right? And
Yeah.
and no pharmaceutical, I don't care what it is side effect free. Like in a past life, I used to work for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And I can tell you that the reason I left is because I was basically selling drugs that I would never take myself. And I realized along the way and learning all about the mechanisms of action and everything is there's always a side effect, guys. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're taking an Advil, there's a side effect. Like in perpetual use, like you do with these GLP-1s, like I don't know what that side effect's going to be, but it scares the crap out of me. And if you
Yeah.
just if you look at history, right? If you look at, we can look at Vioxx, we can look at all of the other, the things, I'm so not a drug person, the opioid crisis, right? Like everything that's overprescribed is always going to come back to haunt us in some way, shape, or form. And so if that's not a red flag for you with these GLP-1s, then it needs to be. And I'm with you. I think there's a place and a space for these drugs. I think there's people that the ROI, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely a polypharmacy overprescribing chaotic syndrome going on. And I think you're right. It's money driven. And anytime somebody's reaching out to me and basically telling me I can make $250,000 a year by putting my clients or recommending this to my clients, that's absolute insanity.
Yeah, it's unethical.
Yeah.
It's sick, I think. And my jaw dropped when I saw that. I'm like, oh gosh, these
Well,
people.
I don't want to sound like a moral high ground guy, but my brain said this. If you and I said no, right? Like 2 out of 10, 8 people out of 10 said yes to that email, or at least responded back and said, "You sure? I'd love to make it." You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that there's that morally, disruptive culture we're in. But listen, if you dangle $250,000 in front of somebody, like most people are going to be like, "Hey, I'd like to hear more."
Right. Yeah. And I think another issue with these is the marketing of them. They are being marketed as like this magic solution. I just had a client who was on it for a couple of months, chose to come off of it because she's like, it didn't do anything for me. Like I was not seeing any significant result that I wasn't seeing before, with just lifestyle changes. So I think that there's different story. I like hearing those real world stories of like, why would I pay for something that I don't feel like is helping curb my cravings, that I don't feel like is helping curb my hunger? And I think a huge problem is this instant gratification culture that we're in and social media where we're constantly comparing ourselves to somebody else. And it is kind of sad where like if I see somebody lost a lot of weight, I'm like, wonder what medication they used, especially if they're like a celebrity or somebody public
Sure.
or it happened really fast. And when we get sucked into this culture, this comparison culture, this instant gratification culture, we forget what it's really about, which is just like your personal growth, your mental growth, your physical growth, your spiritual growth. And that is what this process of getting healthy should be focused on. Not just how much the scale says, not just how you look in your pictures on social media. And you can't rob yourself of that opportunity for personal growth.
Totally agree. Let's wrap up with how we can help people who do have insulin resistance, right? And if 88% of us do, then
Yeah.
everybody listen and really pay attention to this last portion. What can we do from a non-medical, perspective to reverse insulin resistance? And first of all, can we reverse it? Is there an age limit on when we can reverse it? So give me your specs on that.
Yeah. So with insulin resistance, the sooner you start to reverse it, the easier it's going to be to reverse. There are certain effects of insulin resistance that may not be reversible, such as like if you have cognitive impairment or severe peripheral neuropathy, like sometimes once a nerve dies, it's not coming back. And so that's why we really need to be proactive, but there is no age limit on reversing the actual insulin resistance. It's just the effects of sustained insulin resistance that may have a hard time reversing. But it can be reversed at any age. And I think there's a few key things to think about. So inside our Zivley program, we have a 4-pillar approach. We talk about nutrition, which includes what to eat and when to eat. So we talk about intermittent fasting. We talk about sleep. We talk about stress, and we talk about physical activity. All of those pillars are on a foundation of mindset, because if you have a crummy mindset, you're not going to be consistent. You're going to start and stop. You're going to have negative self-talk, and we just have to focus on mindset too. So we kind of try to bring equal parts strategy and mindset to the table. So for people who are listening, there's a few key things that I want you to focus on. The first is to eat adequate amount of protein. So many people, when we're talking about insulin resistance, will just go straight to cut your carbs down, keep your carbs at a certain level per day. But I like to say first, increase your protein to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. And that doesn't necessarily mean what you feel like is a realistic body weight. But Google BMI chart. This is the only thing I use a BMI chart for. Go to your height and then go to like the middle to low end of the healthy or the green zone for your height. So I'm 5'8". So kind of right middle of the road for me is about 140 pounds. And so that's about what I aim for protein. Now, someone who's 5'8" and they're 250 pounds, they might be like, I will never weigh 140 pounds. Maybe 180 pounds is a realistic weight loss goal for me, but don't shoot for 180 grams of protein. Go down to that ideal body weight because 180 grams of protein is quite a bit. So that's the first thing, is get your total daily protein goal dialed in and then do it in a few doses throughout the day. So I typically recommend 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal. If you go way overboard on protein, I have seen people do this. I've seen people eat like 80, 90 grams of protein in one sitting. Your body won't be able to use all of that protein right away. So some of it's going to be broken down into glucose to be stored for energy for later use. So the key to really lowering insulin resistance is keeping the blood sugar and insulin levels low. So a moderate dose of protein, 30 to 50 grams per meal, spaced throughout the day, is important for satiety. And it's also important to preserve your muscle mass. Ideally, this protein is from a high quality source, such as an animal-based protein that has all the essential amino acids in the right combinations and amounts to support healthy muscle mass. You can live at this low insulin, low inflammation lifestyle on a plant-based diet, but it is harder and you don't have as much food variety to choose from. So if people are open to some animal products, I do encourage them to do that. The second thing is to focus on fiber. So getting at least 20 grams of fiber per day from low sugar fruits like strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, avocados. Sometimes there's a little bit of fiber in olives. You can do non-starchy vegetables like broccoli, asparagus, those types of things. Lettuce doesn't really have a lot. Spinach doesn't really have a lot. A lot of people think they're getting fiber because they're having like high volume, but there's actually not a lot of fiber in the foods. I have a free ultimate food guide they can find on my website, and it has a lot of tables for high protein foods, both plant and animal based, high fiber foods. They can download that. So getting your fiber in from low starch sources, so non-starchy vegetables, low sugar fruits, that's going to be an excellent choice to help improve satiety, like we've talked about with the GLP-1 agonists, and improve your gut health, because sometimes blood sugar issues are actually an underlying gut health issue. So that's kind of a whole nother topic. And then the third thing is water. So these basic health habits are very important to lower insulin resistance. You want to aim for half your body weight in ounces of water a day. So if you're 200 pounds, you want to drink at a minimum 100 ounces of water per day, or until your urine is clear or very light yellow. So after you have those habits established, you will naturally have fewer carb and sugar cravings, and it's going to be a lot easier for you then to reduce your sugar intake, which is very important for insulin resistance. If you are drinking pop of any sort, it's important to stop. Added sugar from beverages would be the very, very first place to start reducing added sugar, because the liquid form of sugar is metabolized very quickly. It's really not good for your liver. So don't even drink the diet pops. The sweeteners in diet pops are terrible for your gut health and blood sugar regulation long term. So those would be the few tips that I would start with: protein, fiber, water, and then really start to reduce the added sugar first in the beverages and then in foods. So read your food labels, look for the added sugar line. If it has a box or a barcode or it comes in a bag, there's likely some level of added sugar in there. That's where I would start. That's kind of a big picture overview of some top nutrition things that people can get started with.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. I'm going to link all of your social media, your website, and everything like that in the show notes. But if somebody is just really interested and like eager to find out more about you, like where would be the #1 place you would send people?
Yeah, I'd go to our website. It's Zivli, so ZIVLI.com. And people are like, well, that's a weird name. It means to live a low insulin and inflammation lifestyle. Ziv is to live in Croatian. I am not Croatian. It was just the name that I liked, so I chose that. Zivli.com. There's the free food guide there. Our program opens again for enrollment in September, and it's a 12-week online course and coaching program where we take you through all of those pillars. We teach you a system to implement. We talk about mindset, all the things to really change your lifestyle, lose the weight for good. And so that Zivli program is open again in September, but we have like an insulin resistance diet starter course if they want to take that, and the food guide to get them started.
Awesome. Morgan, thank you so much for all the information today. I think it was very, very valuable. And I think people are going to get some really easy to follow takeaways and hopefully some aha moments to understand that, like, hey, just being on the borderline is not good enough. I'm going to go ahead and treat that as if I've already got a problem. So
Yeah.
thank you for today. It was unbelievably awesome. And I can't wait to, follow your journey and learn more about all the people that you're helping.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on your show.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
I want to take a quick moment to talk about the sponsor of this episode. It is very dear and near and close to my heart because it is Lori's company, SpaStar. If you ever had the opportunity to watch someone create something from a thought or a vision and make this magical thing actually come to life, well, then you'll know why I'm so extremely proud of her and why I'm so excited to have her sponsoring the Thrive Forever Fit Show. If you've listened to my podcast, then you probably heard her on episode 259. If you haven't heard that, I would go listen to episode 259 as soon as you finish this episode. She talks about the story of how she created it, the adversity she overcame, the challenges that she worked through, and just the inspirational story that I know you're absolutely going to love. But what SpaStar is a luxury wrap. And it was created as a spa wrap for people who were getting beauty treatments. But what we found out is it is a piece for everyday life. People are wearing it as swimsuit cover-ups, resort wear, just to get ready in the mornings or for that special event. It is the most unique piece. And I've actually worn this thing several times. I was the actual first model for this. Maybe I'll show you guys some photos of that, Fred, when the time is right. But it is such a cool creation called the Get Ready Wrap by SpaStar. And because you're a listener, you get 15% off today because you support me. So just go to spastar.net, spastar.net, the word spa, the word star.net. And at the checkout, enter Thrive15, THRIVE 15, and you're going to get 15% off of your Get Ready Wrap. So many of my clients already have these and absolutely love them. We're selling them all over the country and all over the world, for that matter, to high-end luxury spas and to people just like you that are using them inside of their own homes. They're traveling with them. They're using them at the pool. It's so really just unbelievably cool to see and witness. And I'm so blessed to be a part of it. And I'm so blessed to have Lori actually sponsoring my podcast, which I think is really, really cool. So go check out SpaStar. I know you're going to love it. It is the coolest thing ever. And guys, this isn't just for ladies. This is one of the coolest gifts you could get any female in your life, for that matter. If Lori hadn't have created it, I would buy them for her as a gift to show her my love and appreciation. So dudes, if you're listening and you need to get a gift for your significant other or some special person in your life, go to spastar.net, grab a Get Ready Wrap. There's all kinds of colors. There's black, there's sage, there's a berry color, there's a gosh, I just went blank. There's a kind of a greeny, kind of avocado-y color. Really cool. You're definitely going to love these, I promise. So go to spastar.net, check it out, support Lori. And Lori, thank you for sponsoring the show.